Okay, study guide for chapter 2, section 2-1 is Intro to Chemistry. Now that is to cram basically a year of chemistry into one little section of the chapter is pretty much what they tried to do here. So it covers everything from atoms and what atoms are made of, right? Protons, electrons, and neutrons, to bonds between atoms, which are covalent or ionic. Now, on these two things, make sure you watch my video. That was one of the required videos where I talked about what bonds are, that their bonds occur because of electrical charges, attraction between electrical charges. That's the essence of it. They're electrical. Remember, your whole body is held together by the same forces that make socks stick to your pants when you take them out of the dryer. The reason they're much stronger, the reason it feels much stronger is because atoms are very small. So for very small things, those forces are extremely strong. All right? So they're very important forces for very small things. The next thing we moved on to was water. And basically the special properties of water. And there's a little diagram in your book that looks something like this. And that's very important because the idea is that water is a polar molecule, which gives it very special properties. Very special properties like the ability to dissolve ions, right? Something called surface tension. Etc. Okay, so those are important properties. Yep, just a minute. Sure. So those are the special properties of water, and one of the another special property of the water is that H2O can split into H plus and OH minus, okay? And this produces acidity, and this is alkalinity, or it's the opposite, right? So bases increase OH minus and acids increase H plus. So we're talking about acids and bases. And under acids and bases, we have something called pH, which is a scale from 1 to 14, right? Where the weird thing, remember, about the pH scale is that the lower the pH, the more acidity you have. So lower pH means more acidity. This thing's messing up my time here. Okay, so pH. Section 2. 2-2 is called the compounds of life. And under compounds of life, basically it talks about carbon and why carbon's special. One of the main reasons that it forms 4 bonds. All right. So because it can form 4 bonds, it means it can make a lot of different kinds of compounds. And then we focused in on the 4 macromolecules. And these were, in this order, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. All right. So carbohydrates, of course, include things like sugar and starch. And the other important terms here in this section are monomer and polymer, right? And this is actually an example right here. Starch is a polymer, where sugar is the monomer. The monomer is the pieces of the polymer. And then under lipids, these are fats and oils. Proteins are made of amino acids, right? Again, these are kind of the key points here that I'm writing down. They're not like everything, but these terms should all ring a bell with you. And you should make sure you know how all these things are defined and how they fit together. And then nucleic acids are DNA and RNA, which we're going to spend a lot more time on. There's a whole chapter on DNA later in the book. In the spring, we'll get to that. And you should know something about what the role of these is, like in the human body, that carbohydrates are primarily used for energy storage. Lipids are used in cell membranes and also for energy storage. Proteins make up, now we know, they make enzymes, right? As well as a lot of other, basically proteins are kind of like the workhorses of the cell. They're the little machines that do all the jobs. I think I mentioned this before, but there are literally proteins that look and function like little pumps or little motors in your cells or in bacteria cells or whatever. So proteins are basically the working parts. Muscle fibers are proteins. And muscle fibers are basically like little ratchet machines that kind of move across each other like this. That's how they shorten. They're almost like they kind of click down. As the chemical environment changes, they move like this in response to each other. And that's how they shrink. And then when they extend, it's really just two strands of protein moving like that. When they shorten, they move together. When they lengthen, they move apart. So proteins are the working parts. Or connective tissues, things like that. And then nucleic acids are very important, obviously. DNA, that's the blueprint of the cell, right? And then section 3 was enzymes. That's what we just finished. I just want to say a couple things about enzymes that you should know. First of all, they're made of proteins. Second, they facilitate chemical reactions. How many of you are in Spanish? Raise your hand. Somebody in French? Let's take it in French. Okay, we've got some French people. What's the word for easy in French? Is it facile? Yeah, I know, but I thought maybe it was similar. So facile, they make chemical reactions easier. They speed them up. Because they make them easier, they speed them up. All right? Now, here's an important point that we learned from the lab. They are very sensitive to temperature. So that means when things get cold, biological processes slow down. That's why we put food in the fridge. So the bacteria don't grow as fast. What happens when you keep that potato salad out all day at the picnic? People get sick. Why? Because the bacteria is growing in that warm mayonnaise. It likes that stuff. And it's there, the bacteria is there, even when it's in the fridge, but there's not much of it. And because it's cold in your fridge, it can't grow very fast because its enzymes aren't doing the reactions very quickly, right? So it's in slow motion. But when you take it out and put it on the picnic table all day and it's 90 degrees outside, those reactions are going to speed up. The bacteria is going to start to multiply. Now when you eat it, you get food poisoning, right? Which can be pretty serious. So they're very sensitive to temp. And then some of you found out when you did the lab, they are also very sensitive to pH. In general, for their whole chemical environment, they're very sensitive to the chemical environment in general. Yeah. That is the amount of acidity. What is it? It actually stands for the power of the hydrogen ion. Power of H+. That's basically what it means. Remember, the H+ is the acidity. That's where the acidity comes from. And then the last thing I want to say is they are very specific. So enzymes are specific. One enzyme works on a specific substrate. So in other words, if you're lactose intolerant, taking Beano will not help you. Okay? And if beans give you gas, taking Lactaid will not help you. It has to be the right enzyme. Why? Because they have a specific shape that has to fit a specific substrate. Now this term is a little confusing because when I look at the word substrate, I'm thinking below. And in my mind, when I think substrate, the first thing I think is that must be the enzyme. You see what I'm saying? But it's not. The substrate is the stuff that's getting reacted, stuff that's getting changed. This is the enzyme. It's not the same as the substrate. And then the other term you need is active site. That's the part on the enzyme that's going to hold on to the substrate. And just remember that they can break things down and they can put things together. They can do both. It's like the difference between metabolic and catabolic, right? And we'll learn those terms later, I guess. Breaking down versus building. You know, your bodies build things too, right? They build all your tissues all the time. They're building new muscle tissue and new skin tissue and stuff like that. So you have to have enzymes that can build things as well as break things down. Okay? Any questions?